Good evening. It's Monday, March 25th, 2024. Welcome to episode 56 of Porterhouse and Teal Live. Joining me tonight is Kyle from Nowhere Homesteady. And Kyle and I just got introduced a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I'd have him on tonight to discuss a whole host of different topics related to liberty, homesteading, technology, and generally the state of the world. And also, I understand that Kyle has a new product out that I'm interested in hearing all about, and it's called Bullet Balm. It's a multi-purpose lubricant that'll not only take care of your leather products, but also the hair on your head. So I'm pretty interested to hear all about that. And I think you guys are going to want to stay tuned. But hey, welcome, Kyle, and thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It's a pleasure. And
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of like to start sometimes with an icebreaker, and one of the icebreakers that I came up for you was, if you could meet any historical figure, past or present, who would it be and why?
Ooh, great question. There's a lot of them, really, but I think if I had to pick just one, based on kind of some things I've been recently getting into, I would have to choose a guy named Samuel Whitmore. There's a story we tell in Project Appleseed, which I know we're going to get into a little later, but there's a story we tell about dangerous old men. And Samuel Whitmore, I encourage your listeners to do some research on him. He was a formidable opponent for the British during the American Revolution, and I think at this stage in life, the older I get, the more I look up to and have a lot of respect and appreciation for those guys that they weren't just gonna lay down arms and just take it, is what I would say. So yeah, Samuel Whitmore is who I'd recommend.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm actually unfamiliar with him, but I might have to give him a look just to, on your recommendation, to see who he was and what he was all about. Yeah, it's interesting how when we get a few years under our belt, our perspective changes so much. And, I'm always trying to learn, and I'm sure that most of us through life, that's what we are generally doing, is learning new things along the way. So I'm definitely going to give that dude a look. But why don't you tell folks who you are, Kyle, and what you do for those that may not have had an opportunity to meet you yet?
Absolutely. And most of you probably haven't, because I'm kind of always heads down doing the work. So I guess I'm a homesteader. I'm a leather worker, and I'm a technologist. I have been working in technology fields and with computers, and as of the last 10 or so years with cloud technologies, I guess, but I've been doing that for most of the last 30 years. And leather work I've been doing for, I guess, since 2011. So, and I guess we've been on our property where we are now for since 2019. And I've fallen in love with the efforts of raising sheep and basically animals, and providing food security and a number of other things. It's good.
Right. Yeah. I guess we talked about it a little bit beforehand, but what was your entry into homesteading, if you will? What was the thing that caused you to think, hey, I need to start doing this?
I will say that a lot of it was inspiration from my wife and her family. Some part of her upbringing, she was raised on property in some rural land, and it was always a vision of hers to get back to land, or to land ownership, I should say. It was always I wanted it for a number of years as well. And in 2016, we had our first opportunity to escape the city. At that point, there was, there was some early interest in preparedness type things, making sure that we had food on hand and a number of other things. But it was a shallow mindset. It was a shallow understanding. All we knew was we needed to get to where we could grow things, where we could have more direct ownership of our lives and the things that go in the pantry. That's where it started. And
Right, but what was there anything in particular, I guess, is what I'm kind of asking. Was there anything in particular? A lot of times people have something that happens that causes their shift from thinking, oh, hey, I'm somebody who's comfortable living in the city, to now I think I need to have maybe more property space around me. I need to be a little bit more self-reliant. I need to be, changing my lifestyle, because a lot of people started like from the city aspect of things. And I don't know if that's your story as well, but you say you moved from kind of the Dallas area to now you're in more of a rural area. So was there anything that happened that forced that into your decision?
The straw, I would say, that broke the camel's back, the catalyst, the ultimate catalyst, I would say, was an event that happened in the the house we were living in Dallas. And it was in the heart of Dallas proper, in a very nice area. And at 3:00 in the morning, there is a chase happening right outside our bedroom window, and basically bullets go flying from cars chasing each other. And that caused us to pause and have a little bit of a come to Jesus moment, realizing just the state of where we were. Now, we weren't ignorant to what was going on in the world at that point with, Trump coming in and all that. It was, but that was the catalyst. That was ultimately the thing that made us go, you know what, we don't want to be here anymore, and it's time that we need to take advantage. We need to actually pursue the dreams that we have been talking about for too long, and instead of looking for another place in the city, we need to just go find land and start that journey.
Yeah, I knew that there had to be some reason that was the driving factor. Everybody's got their own reason why things change in their lives and kind of flips that switch. But what prompted you to move from Texas, where you were at, to where you're at now in Kansas? What was the draw to Kansas?
Well, so the land that we were on in Texas was hard packed clay and was a cotton farm in the 1800s, and we couldn't grow anything. that was part of it. And then I would say that we were at a place in life where we had run its course in Texas. For most of our first 20 years of marriage, my wife basically told us, I'll follow you anywhere in Texas. And that kind of ran its course, I guess. And so I'm praying about it, and I'm on the phone with my best friend one night, and we're just discussing it and trying to figure out where God's telling us to go next. And my buddy goes, why don't you move to Kansas?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it was like, well, it's not me you have to convince. It's Yaya, it's Laura. So, but he did, and we've made a very nice life here. And I look back now, and I thank God for where He's put us, for the opportunities that we've had, for the relationships we've built as a result of the Midwest Preparedness Project. And I don't want to go back ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Texas is actually one of those states that people they're flocking to, they're moving to. So obviously, it can't be all bad. What about Texas do you miss most, if you can cite anything?
The only thing that I miss is my family. Having them 14 hours away from me is a bit of a challenge. But they don't want to leave, and I don't want to go back. So,
yeah,
But as far as everything else, I'll be honest. There's not a single thing I miss. There's just not anymore.
Right. Do you have young kids?
No. We tried, but that was never never part of the vision, I guess, that became our life.
Right. I would say this, that for somebody who's actually in a position to move and they're looking at maybe changing states, because this is something that we pondered a while ago. And
Yep.
usually it's your employment that holds you to a place. That's a big draw for people, as far as proximity to work. And that was one of the reasons that we decided to stay. But that was something that we considered, was leaving the state when we moved from where we moved some 23 years ago. And we had young family at the time. And that would be my recommendation to anybody, is move before your children meet somebody.
Oh, 100%.
Because when they decide, oh, hey, I'm going to get married with this person, now you've got the attachment to the in-laws.
Yes.
And it makes it very difficult just to say, oh, we're just going to leave and go somewhere else, because now there's that other side of a whole nother family. And so that's why I was asking, because, people make that, hey, just move to another state. Well, family's one of the biggest draws in my life that's going to make my decisions. It's not about where you live and, the state. I mean, my state has a lot of problems, as a lot of states have a lot of problems, but it's just, that's one interesting thing, that if I had to do it over, we would have moved then, and then I would have had to figure out how to commute from wherever I moved back to my job. But it's an interesting thing.
The ironic, I'll just inject this here too. The ironic thing about that is we now have our family on property, her family. So her mom and dad were we convinced them finally to move in with us, and so they're we're actually in the third phase of our plan. We're a little behind schedule for 2023, being 2024 now, but that was always part of our vision, was to get them up here, and that's happening now, actually.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because from my standpoint, there's always misconceptions that people have about places that they don't and haven't lived, and they make perceptions based on what they believe about a place. What would you say is a common misconception people have about Texas that maybe you'd like to correct?
There's less cowboys than you think. Less real cowboys. I mean, I know that's kind of a cliche response, but that's the reality of it. Texas is a very multicultural state. Even before the influx of every other state moving into it, it's very multicultural. It has just a very diverse population, and there's a lot of excellent people there. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty astute observation, quite honestly. I think every state is getting to be that way, particularly when you include the large metropolitan areas. There's a lot of, it's like every other place where there's a bunch of people that are looking for government handouts and looking for daddy government to take care of them. You're going to have that type of person living in your state. So if you have a city over 100,000 people, it's probably not going to be the people that are looking for learning how to be more self-reliant and grow their own stuff.
Right.
So you're gonna have that influence no matter where you live, no matter which state you're in. And it's funny you say that, because I used to think, well, Texas is a little bit more conservative. Well, my son took a trip there for a bachelor party, I don't know, 2 years ago or so. And he went out to Austin, and he's like, you will not believe this. He's like, Austin is like Berkeley. He's like, it's like Skid Row. It's like all these. Yeah. It was just crazy. It's like Seattle to him,
Yep.
Super liberal, super just interesting. But
that's appealing to some people, but it was not to me. And in the last several years that we were there, the statistics was indicating that there was Texas was taking in an influx of over 1 million people a year, and that just wasn't something we were willing to put up with. And I get that. You can sell your 1,200 square foot, $1.2 million house in California and come buy 6 of them in Texas. But, leave your politics at the door. And unfortunately, they didn't. So,
Right. No, I get it, man. Totally. Um, uh, so you're somebody who works leather. You've been
yeah,
doing leather crafting and leather works for some time. When did you get started in that?
2011 was when I got started. Um, I was working in an office, and a guy that I worked with, was really good friends with, walked in the door with a new bag from Saddleback Leather Company. And the way my mind worked at the time then and still now, it was, I wanted to know how it was made. I was it was so beautiful and floored me that I wanted to build it myself. I didn't want a copy of it. I wanted to understand the nuanced process of taking flat skin leather and constructing it into a three-dimensional, functional, useful object. And that pursuit of knowledge, of understanding, led into just a lifelong hobby um, that has served me well to this day.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What kind of things do you make?
Hats, bags of all sorts and kinds, duffel bags, weekender, day tripper type things, backpacks. I've made a few purses over time, belts. I make fedoras and flat caps. Um, I mean, really, it's one of those things that it's probably more appropriate to ask what I don't make, and what I don't make are holsters and knife sheaths. And
Why is that?
there, you'd find that interesting given the culture that we're in, but the real reason for it is everybody else does it, and it does it better. There's nothing unique about those. For, for There's too many makers that already do those things, so we make more interesting stuff, like Spags is saying in the channel, smelting aprons.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
that
that's pretty cool. Is there any type of leather that you prefer to work with more than another?
Oh yeah. So I would. There's two different main classifications of leather. One is veg tan. One is a chrome tan. For veg tan, I have a number of different suppliers that I really like, but as of late, for the last 5 or 6 years, my favorite leather to work with is what's called Kodiak or Kodiak Bandito. There's a couple of tanneries in the world that make it, but my favorite, it comes out of a tannery in Brazil. And this leather is what's classified as a pull-up leather. You can stretch it and run your fingernail across it and scar it, and basically you can buff it right out. So it's very self-healing. It's weather resistant. So a lot of the things that I've made as of late are usually made in that Kodiak leather, and that's really one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a very leatherworks is a very unique craft, and if you're somebody who's artistic, it's probably just a natural progression. And I don't know, you had said that you're somebody who is creative and stuff like that, so it's probably a good outlet for you, right?
It absolutely is. It's a completely different world than the technology world we work in. And the running joke I always make is that I want to do something tangible because I get tired of sitting in front of my square-headed girlfriend all day. You
Yeah.
know, we in front of the computer. So I work 8 to 14 hours a day sometimes, and my longest run in a data center was 37 and a half hours straight. Um, and so as a complete polar opposite to that, I want to build things that are tangible, still highly functional and useful, but useful in meat space.
Right.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, my brother was very artistic. He was a very talented guy. He died in 1993,
Mm.
and he made me. He was a big brother. He was my big brother. I looked up to him. He was a professional ice skater. He was gay, so he wound up catching AIDS
Mm.
when that whole thing was a big deal, and he died. And he died at age 38, but he was an incredibly talented person. He was good at about everything that he ever did. He was a track star. He was an athlete,
Wow.
artistic. He could draw anything. And so he got into making leather products, and he made me a few wallets over the years.
Mm.
and I cherish them to this day. I still have them, and I use them sometimes. And he actually made a belt for my father. And it's an interesting thing. My father never wore that belt because you know how some people are. They're like, "Oh, that's really nice. I'm not going to wear it or whatever."
Yeah.
And so I decided to wear that belt on March 16th, which was the day that my brother was born, but it was also the same day that my dad died.
Oh, wow.
And so I've been wearing this belt. Let me show it to you. I've been wearing this belt since March 16th of last year, but this is something that my brother made.
Wow.
And
that's gorgeous, man.
yeah, and it's got all the grapevines on there, you can see.
Yeah.
And he tooled all that in because my dad, you know, he had his own little vineyard and stuff. And then we had Hereford cattle. And so he's got a cow on either side with my dad's initials, Joe Johnson. You know, and so I've been wearing this. My dad never wore this, but I wore this on the day that my dad died. And I'm like, yeah, I'm wearing that. And he was buried right next to my brother Ken, who made that.
See,
So,
there's something tangible about that. There's something.
Oh yeah, that's a priceless piece, man.
Yeah.
You know, but he died in 1993, but that's still around today, and I'm using that. So
this is
this is a tribute to both of them. But yeah, that's sweet, man.
I made this in 2015, and I wear it. It's my belt, and I wear it every single day. That's an Eastern Australian brown snake. It's a skin that my wife found at an estate sale in Dallas. It was over 6 feet long, and I ended up making this belt, a holster for a case knife, and a holster for a 1911 that I was very proud of. But I've been wearing this belt every day since I made it in 2015, and it's my story belt. So it tells the story of my weight loss journey. Just as that belt is sentimental to you and your family, to your dad, and now to you. Yeah. This means a lot to me because they tell stories. Things like this. They're powerful in that way.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. That's a good looking belt.
Thank you.
You need to put some bullet balm on that thing.
I do. It's wearing out, man, and starting to curl. But you know what? I'm determined to keep it running as long as I can. So yeah, I need some bullet balm for sure.
So how'd the name Bullet come to? That's a nickname of yours, correct?
Yes. It's one of many that I've had over the years. Sometimes, in life you have a story that defines or that a name comes out of. Sometimes you have a name that comes out of something and the story develops later. In my case, that's where Bullet came from, was the latter. So we were figuring out, looking at different things to put on a license plate at one point, and or on a truck. I guess it was a logo. I forget. Anyway, my wife came up with it, and we couldn't use, for whatever it was, the lettering limitations. We couldn't use an E. We had to use an I. And so that's where the initial name came from. But then the story kind of started to really develop, and I just started to adopt it. Right, you start to adopt a name, and it became Bullet because, well, the SH is silent. The bullshit. In other words, I'm a no bullshit kind of person. So I don't have time for it. I'm pretty direct and upfront, and that's got me into trouble in the past, but it's also served me well. I'm just a lot more kind about it now than I used to be. Yeah, that's the story behind the name.
Yeah, right on. What, in your opinion, I guess, as far as from a leather crafting, what makes a piece stand out to you? What is something that you have to put into a piece to make it uniquely stand apart from other that somebody else would put out? A lot of people build belts. A lot of people make purses. A lot of people make all these different things. What is the thing that you put into it that makes it stand out aside from somebody else's piece?
Well, that's just it. There is no other piece like this, and that's what makes it. there is no other belt like your belt. It is custom. It is unique. It is made specifically for the person who requested it. I love mass-produced leatherwork to a certain degree, but there comes a point where what makes something special is who you're making it for. Like the leather aprons that I make for the smelting club, for the group that, Spags from Spags Unlimited, and Patrick and I are in from the MPP group. That those aprons that I make, for those guys, there's a labor of love that goes into it because I'm making it for them, right? So part of my process when I do any sort of leather work for somebody is I need to understand what you're going to use it for. And then if I don't understand that subject, I go off and I do a bunch of research so that I can make sure that I'm building something that is going to fit their needs, right? And ultimately what the result is, what sets it apart is that it ends up being unique and it's for them. It wasn't tailored for Eric from Porterhouse and Teal. It was tailored for Bobby from Spags Unlimited. You know what I mean? And while you may be able to come over and use it, it's his, and it's never going to be for anybody else but him. If he sells it, that's fine. But that's when the real intrinsic value of it goes away, is if he chooses to sell it and the next person does not have the story that goes with it.
Sure. Yeah, that's good way to look at it, man. It's definitely a craft. You're putting your hands and your thoughts and your flavor into it, and that's what makes custom pieces like that so special. In my opinion.
Yeah. My bags take about 40 hours on average to make every one of them.
Right. What would you give somebody as advice who's looking to get into starting out in leather crafting?
Do it. What I mean is put your hands on it and actually go for it. You are not going to know anything. And this is advice I'd give for anybody wanting to do anything, but especially for leather work. There's only so much you can research on YouTube. There's only so much advice you can take from other people. There comes a point where you have to put your own investment into it, and that's an investment in resources for the leather itself, for the tools to make those things, right? There's only so much you can take for free in advice and resources before you really have to dive into it. And once you do, that's when the real learning begins. I would say it took me 4 or 5 years to really get good and feel comfortable about working with leather. But I would still do it all the time. It was the one thing that really gave me peace and allowed me a mental escape from other aspects of life.
Yeah, that's really good advice, man. And that, as you said, it crosses boundaries, not just leather crafting, it's everything. Because a lot of people, research things and they see things on the internet and they're like, oh, that's really cool. I'm going to do that. Well, that's great. I encourage people to go out and to do it, because the only way that you're going to know if it works for you in your context is to validate that for yourself, because there's so many variables, particularly when it's, just take anything around the homestead. There's just so many variables about growing vegetables or making compost or animal husbandry. It's all different. And every situation is similar, but it's completely different. And so that's very good advice, because it crosses not only leatherworks, but every facet of life. You just have to go out there and live it. You can't sit on the sidelines and be a spectator and think you're going to be able to replicate that.
A person can't buy their way into skill.
Right. I would want to, I guess, dovetail onto that and kind of ask you the question. Obviously, when you start out homesteading, how long have you been doing that?
Successfully 4 years. But like I said, we've been on land since 2016. In the first 3 years on our property in Texas, we learned a lot. And we learned a lot through a lot of failure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things when you start out homesteading that you just don't know.
Yeah.
And even
And
after you've been homesteading for a lifetime, there's a lot of things you just don't know.
that's just it, man. We still fail. We fail all the time. The difference is we're willing to do it, and what we fail at, we don't have to stay in it because we're marrying it up with lessons we've learned in the past and lessons we're learning now. So it's all an adaptation of knowledge that we've already gained,
Sure.
uh, and growing from there. But yeah, I mean, it just getting into the dirt and doing the work.
What have you found as far as resources that have you found to be the most helpful in helping you bridge the gap between that which you don't know and that which you seek to know?
Community, um, getting getting in. That's the wrong way of saying it. Embedding myself, injecting ourselves with a community of people who are doing similar things and want to learn, want to do. Yes, exactly, Yoda. Failure is how you learn. It's part of it. It's part of life, whether we try to educate it out or not. But yeah, getting into a community of like-minded people that can show you and aren't judgy for it, right? So I have a quick example of that. We were very interested in getting into canning, but coming from a city life and not having much experience with that, no experience with it growing up, we knew it was an important part of what we needed to do for food preservation. We just didn't know how to get there. And after the Boston Marathon bombing, our mind was, if we put a pressure cooker on the kitchen counter and heat it up to try and seal cans, are we going to blow up our house? We didn't know. And I mean, I'm not even joking about that. We honestly didn't know. And so every time we heard somebody say, "Well, you need to just can. You need to learn how to can and do this." And then we were gifted one from a member of our community who passed away, and the resources that he had were being shared with the members of the community. So we were gifted one, and we had another member of the community come over to our kitchen in our space in our using our tools and what we had available to us, and taught us everything that we needed to know to get started and jump start into that learning process. We did a video on it. I mean, it was just last year. So like, we're not masters at this and have not been doing this successfully forever. It's you know what I mean? It's a learning process, and there's always new opportunities. But I think the community is a big part of it, because you can draw on the experiences of others.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's something that we all would benefit from expanding and building
Yeah.
is growing that community. It's a really important aspect of making yourself whole. And yeah, that's pretty excellent, man. I know that you have chickens and you got sheep on your homestead, but are there any other animals you'd like to add, if any?
Right now, I'm going to say no. We were heavily invested in chickens when we first got them a couple of years ago, and just started learning to work with them. And we didn't want anything else because we were trying to master that part of it, right? And then the chickens came on, the sheep came on a year ago, by way of our friends from Grumpy Acre Farm. They were kind of the catalyst that helped us get into it, and our first sheep came from them, and the community came over and helped us build our shelter for the sheep. And so we've just invested in that. I've been asked about cattle and things like that, and I think for us, the way we've always looked at it is, I don't want an animal that I feel like I can't control. And so 1,000-pound beast that can rake me across a barbed wire fence for the hell of it, just because they got spooked or turned sideways to the left, that's not my idea of a good time. Some people are better equipped to handle that. We're just not. We're not. So we kind of took it more animals that we could manage, that produced things that we knew we wanted.
Mhm.
Eggs, meat, the tallow for the bullet bomb, other things too. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really good, man. I think there's a tendency for a lot of people where they'll get new into homesteading, and then they want to get all the animals. They want to get this, they want to get that, they want to get all of these animals. And you can totally do that. You can totally stack a bunch of livestock on a pretty small piece of property. But the reality of that is that it's work, and it also costs a tremendous amount of money to feed those mouths, and it's just one of those things that you kind of have to gauge what you're doing on the property that you have and make it work for yourself. And it sounds like you really thought that through quite well.
There's a process in my life as a technologist that we use to describe it, and it's be willing to fail small, and fail fast. So you want to be willing to put yourself in that position where you can jump into it. You want to give yourself the opportunity to fail or succeed, because if you fail, you're going to learn from it. And you want to be able to do it to where it's not going to destroy you, and you can learn and recover, but you want to get through those failures as fast as you can, because the faster you get through failure, the faster you get to success. And so patience is a big part of it. If you jump in and go buy all the animals, as you said, you run the risk of failing fast, but failing at its expensive cost to where you can't recover from that.
Yeah, and I also think there's some value too, though, in learning those lessons, because a lot of people have to find that point of failure before they decide, I'm going to scale things back a little bit. I tried this and it didn't work, and I tried that and I don't like it, So I think it's just a natural progression that a lot of homesteaders go through, a lot of people go through. They see all of these things that they can do, and they do it, and then they figure out eventually over time what's going to be best suited for them. So I think you're taking a more analytical approach and going into it. But
that's probably the nerd part of me too, but I mean, I think it's also a measure of risk tolerance. It's like, if you've got one shot, just one chance, and you can't afford to fail, then you go slow into it. If you can't afford to fail big, you go slow into things, and you pick your risks where they make sense for you and your risk tolerance. And everybody's going to be different. We took 2 or 3 years of observation and progression on our property before we planted. Well, I say not planted, before we got animals for the first time. Like, we went through 2 years of just understanding the land, understanding the soil, figuring out where we could plant trees and be successful with that. We took our risk in smaller increments and figured out what works before we were ever willing to go to animals. And then when we did, I called up our friends in Texas and was like, we want chickens. Laura doesn't know yet, but she wants chickens. That's how we got into it.
Yeah, that's great, man. I think a lot of people see what takes place on YouTube, and they see the best part of what people want to show them on YouTube, right? They're putting their best foot forward in their videos and whatnot. And so people get that as an impression of maybe this is how it is. And that's not always reality. And so it's just important to understand that. And like, for myself, as an example, I had my upbringing to kind of guide me into the life that I live now, because I got a chance to see how we did things, raising cattle, transporting them onto other people's property. I mean, we had upwards of 125 head we were managing at one point. And this is on leased ground, and we're fixing other people's fence, and we're feeding these animals, and you can see that the profitability of things like that, how they just don't pencil out. And so when I got a chance to have this place, I didn't enter it with this rosy idea of I'm going to do all these things. I had a much different approach, but I was able to actually live it and see the failures of somebody trying to overextend themselves
Yep.
And then it just gives you a different like perspective on how you want to approach your homesteading journey, you know?
Exactly, man. And that's what we did too. It was everything was a cost basis analysis. Everything was a, if we have to make this land profitable for us, what are the things that are going to produce the most yield, or what can we do now that will produce that yield that we need in the future when we
Yeah.
don't have a full-time job to support it? You know what I mean?
Right. No, I 100% know what you mean. In fact,
So,
we got rid of a lot of our animals because of that, because I
yeah,
wanted to be able to say, what can my property support?
right.
What can, if there's a supply chain issue and I can't get feed, or feed gets so incredibly expensive that I can't run to go feed my animals, I'm out of the business.
Yep.
So I need to be able to scale my operation so that I'm able to feed my animals off this property with the fodder that I can grow here, with the grass that grows here,
Yes.
and go from there and see if it works. And to this point, it's working, but we've had to scale things back considerably. But I mean, that's just a change in mindset based on what I've seen in the last like 3 years with all these things that have happened, right? With COVID and
Oh,
supply chain and all this sort of stuff, because we had 20 plus years of doing it in another way, So
absolutely. I very much agree. And
yeah, man.
when you can scale back like that, and you can get to that break even point, or that point where you can start to see the land be more self-sufficient, it's a beautiful thing, man. It's yeah, when you're able to dial it back in, it really is something special. And
Yeah, yeah.
you got to
I've
have a
got,
process
go ahead.
mind to really see that, I think. But yeah.
Sure. I got some folks asking about this smelting thing. What is smelting? Tell me all about smelting. People want to know about smelting.
we yeah, so we get together and we melt metal. So it's kind of a subsection of our group. We get together periodically a couple of times a year, and we melt metal, and throughout the year we'll be sourcing like brass and aluminum and copper and silver and other things too, if we can get our hands on it. But basically it's we're practicing, is what I would say. We're practicing, and we're basically creating uh, ingots of commercial grade or industrial grade metals that are necessary. So things like big copper ingots, or brass ingots, things that industrial facilities might then be able to turn around and make back into something useful.
Hmm.
But in the short term, in the immediate term, they're scrap. They're motors that don't run anymore, and you have to tear them apart to pull these things out. They're scrap bits of cable that are absolutely worthless. They're bullet casings that that you can't reload or turn into new ammunition, that sort of thing. So
So
we take that junk metal and we do something with it.
is the thought to melt that stuff down and then just have it stored somewhere in surplus so that if it's ever needed to be made into something, you'll be able to turn it into something? Or are you actually doing something with it that you're using at this point?
So there's a couple of initiatives there. The first one is, I would say, yes, storage of those metals, where we can, putting them back so that there's a market resource in the event that we need it. We have it available for barter, for trade, for sale, whatever. The secondary agenda is, and really, in my opinion, it's kind of the primary agenda, is to learn how to melt metal, how to shape and work metal. And it's not just about dumping a bunch of raw materials into a furnace and watching it turn into something liquid, and then pouring it into a bar. It's okay. How can we turn it into an ingot? How can we turn it into a coin? Right? Well, how cool would it be if we could cast our own copper coins? Like, and I don't mean like trying to imitate currency. I'm talking about just like, let's go make our own kind of coin that they used in John Wick, you know, just something cool like that, just to have. So those are things that we explore, we experiment, and then if future being an interesting time, if there's opportunity to make stuff like necklaces or other useful things out of metal. Just simply knowing how to do it and having that knowledge practiced at our fingertips and not just something we've seen in YouTube videos. That's appealing for us, for all of us that are doing it.
Right. Yeah, it seems like it would be very hot standing around that smelting pot, man. I mean, it's probably a good place to get hydrated too, right? You want to hydrate while you're
Oh, 100%. Yeah. More than just hydration, dude. You want PPE as well. That brass creates some nasty off gas. And I mean, so there's, like I said, there's learning curve to it. You got to figure out what PPE is appropriate, what tools and equipment you need. All these things are just they're learning opportunities. While we're in a position as a country, as a people, as however you want to classify it, we're in a space where we can learn in a protected environment. We should be taking every opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, man. That's 100%. Take the opportunity to learn and grow and be better, because we're all just figuring this out as we go through life, right?
Yeah.
We get new things thrown at us, and we all of a sudden our eyes open up and we go, man, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't realize that was that way. And it's just all a big learning process. So I think being able to bat around ideas, have conversations, and learn from each other through community and all of those things is super important.
Nothing fancy used to say embrace the suck. Like, it doesn't matter that it's going to be a 2200 degree furnace. It doesn't matter that it's 110 degrees outside. Embrace that suck. Embrace that opportunity now to learn, because in the future you're not going to have that opportunity. You will regret. A person who always wanted to learn how to play the piano will regret never learning how to play the piano. And so I don't want to live a life of regret. And so a big part of it is just being willing to put myself out there and find those opportunities that are interesting.
Yeah, it's great, man. So Project Appleseed, tell me what it is and what's your involvement with it.
Absolutely. So Project Appleseed is a nationwide organization put on by the Revolutionary War Association. It's a 501(c) nonprofit, and the primary objective for that organization is teaching about the events of April 19th, 1775 that led up to the Revolutionary War. We do that by telling about the three strikes that led up to the events of Lexington and Concord, and a number of other subjects kind of sprinkled in, like Dangerous Old Men, talking about Samuel Whitmore, Paul Revere's Ride, several other things that are kind of all tied to the Revolutionary War events. And the primary objective of Project Appleseed is to basically encourage people to understand the heritage and where we are in this country, and what it really took to get here, to get free, to accomplish this grand experiment that is the United States of America, and not to take that for granted. And while we do feel there are a number of things that we can't change, everyone should be taking a vested interest in changing the world around them. And so Project Appleseed accomplishes that by first and foremost by teaching marksmanship, because as Americans, our first, I would argue that our one of our core responsibilities is to be accomplished with a rifle. It has been the case ever since we were founded, from our infancy. Marksmanship and rifleman, being a rifleman and having the ability to defend yourself and those around you has been a core component of who we are. And I think that that's why I got into it. So nationwide, if you go to I believe it's appleseedinfo.org, you can pull up event maps nationwide. They even have them in California. Quite a few of them, actually. And they'll do 25-meter traditional events. It's a 2-day event, Saturday and a Sunday, where they will teach you the fundamentals of marksmanship, we have people that are very accomplished long range shooters that come in that learn a different way of doing things. We have tactical gurus that come in that know everything, that learn stuff that they've never thought of or used before. It's an excellent program, and it's not just 25-meter shoots either. They have known distance events where you shoot out to 400 yards, and a number of other like really interesting competitions, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word. But the focus is we use marksmanship as a tool, as a training aid, but the real objective is the history and where we come from as a nation. So come for the marksmanship, come for the history, whichever one it is, both of them will hook you. And if you're like me, you'll end up in the program as an instructor in training, which is what I've been doing for the last year. And I'm expecting to finish my going through all my boot camps and procedural stuff that I need to qualify to become a full-blown instructor, hopefully in the next couple of months, or certainly by the end of the year is my objective.
Yeah, very cool. Now you guys are shooting black powder, obviously, right?
No, modern rifles. So
okay.
I mean, there are black powder events that they have, but a lot of it is the 25-meter is usually 10-20 or a 22 long rifle. A lot of people show up with 10-22s, Ruger 10-22s. We also shoot center fire, so a lot of folks show up with AR-15s, AR-10s, and the like. And yes, I have seen people show up to an event with 308s and things like that. I usually come with my AR-15, which is out of frame right now. But then they also do pistolier classes. So another subsection of Project Appleseed is pistolier training, and so they teach you. It's not just a marksmanship in terms of riflemen. It's they also instruct in pistols as well.
Yeah, cool, man. You ought to figure out how to come with an A10 Warthog.
Oh man,
that'd be a pretty cool shoot, I think, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I could fly in a plane though. I would love to be that ground cover though. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be something.
That honestly is one of my favorite military fighter jets. I love the Warthog and its initiative and purpose in life, and it's irritating that they're retiring it. But
yeah, that's a pretty unique aircraft for sure.
It is.
There's a lot of folks in here from the Midwest Preparedness Project. How'd you get tied in with those hooligans?
Oof, good question. 2019, I got invited to the fall camp out at Perry Lake, Kansas, not knowing what to expect. Gate was locked. Weather was horrible. Like, I mean, it was just, okay, am I walking into some kind of militant group, some kind of weirdness or whatever else? And, it ended up being a fun event. And I met, long story short, I met Tag. I met Patrick and Spags and several other people at that first event that just made me feel right at home. And over the years since that time, I haven't missed a single one, and every event that I go to, I just become more invested, and not just invested in the program, but invested in the people. We have developed some very strong relationships with members of this group, and I regard them as, Patrick and Bobby, for example, I regard them as brothers. We have just they're extensions of our family from our perspective, and with what has developed in the group with Tag and others, what we have accomplished, the community things that we have built, the work days that we do together, building on each other's properties, cutting wood together to make sure that homes are heated in the wintertime. Just that level of support, it's one of those things that makes you come back to it over and over and over again. And it's a very unique experience that is family oriented. And it's not like any other prepper event you'll ever go to, I don't think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been hearing from some folks. Spags is popping off that that I need to get out there sometime. And, maybe that's something that we'll
You
do
too,
here
man.
in the future. We were just talking about that prior to the broadcast, but yeah, it's everything that I've heard about Midwest preparedness. It's a good event. And I understand there's another event coming up here this spring. So if there's people that are maybe interested in going out there to Kansas and seeing what they have available, you can go on midwestpreparedness.com and check out the event dates and see if there's some way you can get out there to hang out with some pretty cool people.
Yep. I'll be there. It's midwestpreparednessproject.com, and it is part of the Great American Preparedness Tour.
Right. Yeah, I see that your image has kind of frozen up on the screen there. I can still hear you fine. I'm assuming people can still hear both of us fine, which is really all that matters. Nobody needs to see our ugly faces. But if people in the chat can maybe give us a status check on, our audio, if it's coming through 5x5, that would be good. If not, we'll have to try to figure something out, see if we can't fix it.
Yeah, I guess we are froze up visually. I hope that my technology.
Okay. Spag says we're 5x5, so that's good to go.
All right, good.
Right on. Yeah, I can hear you fine, and there's no glitching in the audio, so it just kind of is what it is.
Okay.
So you're somebody who has been in technology for a number of years, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Hang on a second.
Do what?
Sorry, I had something pop up on my screen, but go ahead.
Oh.
So how long you been in tech?
2024 represents my 30th year in technology.
Wow.
I've basically been doing it since I was 16. Let's see. Yeah, I won't give you the whole history lesson, but long story short, my parents showed up at home with a computer, and I fell in love with what it was capable of. Tore it apart, broke it about 3 or 4 times in a year or two that we had that machine. And then it was just a progression of diving deeper. And like leatherwork, I got into it for the physical side of it. I wanted to understand. Can you still hear me?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Something flashed on my screen. I wanted to understand technology,
The government,
at a deeper level. I wanted to know how computers go together, what makes them tick. I wanted to understand motherboards and CPUs and RAM and hard drives and all those individual components. So that was my indoctrination into it. And then from there, I wanted to do it for other people. So I started a consulting company at like 16 and was repairing stuff for people. And then, kind of got into data centers, got into Linux engineering and networking and a number of other things. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been predominantly working within the sphere of the Amazon cloud. The AWS cloud architecture is really what I build in, or what my team's built in now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, interesting. What would you say is, in that 30 years, in your opinion, has been the most groundbreaking technological advancement?
The onset of artificial intelligence is pretty crazy. It scares me a little bit, but I think there's some interesting opportunities possible with it. That's one. I would say the other is in things like development operations, or what we call DevOps today. In the DevOps world, it's a process of marrying what developers do with application development and what infrastructure engineers like I did to deploy those applications programmatically. I could nerd out on this stuff, man, so I don't want to irritate your audience. but that whole process of taking an application and automatically sending it out to a production environment so that it can be useful. There's so many cogs in that wheel and how that has to work. Yeah. But yeah.
You had mentioned that, AI has you a little concerned, and what would you say, in what way?
I don't think it will become sentient. I don't think God would allow that, first and foremost. But I do think that it has an opportunity to uh, mislead us, or we have an opportunity to be misled by it. The old adage, statistics. You can make statistics will say whatever you want. Like, you can make data say whatever you want. Um, Artificial intelligence, I think, is a glorified way of capturing, organizing, and manipulating that data to say whatever you want. So you're only as good as whoever's training, whoever's in charge of the narrative. And I think that's the concerning part. It's if we trust artificial intelligence because somebody tells us to trust artificial intelligence, we should be questioning why and who is behind it.
Sure. Bob Sponge has a question. He says he wants to know if you have any smart technology in your house.
Absolutely not. Not at all, and never will. I forbid it. I know how it works. I know
What's
yeah.
smart technology as you would define it?
What we used to call the Internet of Things. So things like smart meters on your furnace, smart meters on your stove, so that you can remotely control the temperature while you're watching TV in the living room. Things like temperature on your oven. I mean, what you see, you're making cookies, right? And you want to control what the temperature is on your oven, or you got something in there for 3 hours. You pop open the Bluetooth app, and you can control that. Other technologies, things like Alexa, Echo, Google Home, all those things. Even Siri, we won't use it. I don't use that
How
at all.
about Ring doorbell?
No, hell no, absolutely not.
Okay.
That's an invasion of privacy, and um, we gave it up. We gave up privacy in the name of security, and um, there are some very powerful statements made by our founding fathers about that I think resonate very well. And I don't necessarily need to come up with my own words, but basically, if those who value security over freedom deserve neither.
Sure. What about the idea that everything that's coming in the future is you're not going to have an option to really opt out of it, in the sense that everything that's going to be made is going to be in some way connected to the internet, whether that be a TV or appliances in your home or vehicles that are going to be new. I mean, that's where they're headed. So how do we navigate through something like that? Do we just continue completely opt out of having any of those devices? And I think that works to an extent for people of our age, but what about the generations that are going to be coming after us, our children and our grandchildren? Because we should be thinking about more than just ourselves. Is
Mhm.
there anything, in your opinion, that can be done to combat something like that for the generations that will follow?
To the level possible for any person, I think that we have a responsibility um, to do the hard things and to understand. I don't know how to put this. There's so many levels to that, man. You need to understand what it took to actually get to that point, so that you're not always just choosing the easy way. I think that's part of it. I think everybody has a responsibility to set themselves up and the next generation for more freedom, not less freedom. I think that the what I would encourage the younger listeners or younger viewers to do would be to get involved in ways that empower their freedom, and not don't give it up in the name of security or compliance. And at a minimum, go read books like Fahrenheit 451 or 1984, and understand what those dystopian environments are modeled after, and look very closely and critically at where we are in the world today, and how close we are to those kinds of outcomes if we're not careful. There's still an opportunity to change it, for maybe not for folks like you and me, because maybe we're too old. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there's more opportunity, I think, for the next generation than there is for ours, and so there's a responsibility that comes with that opportunity to go change it.
Yeah, I wish there was more of a recognition from the younger generation for what you just said. I completely agree with you. It's in their hands. It's their life.
Mm-hmm.
They have the ability to make those sort of changes. But I don't have a lot of hope, large scale, for society moving in that direction. And I don't mean to sound the negative, but that's just my perception of how humans behave. They do tend to give up their freedom for security in a lot of instances. So I think it's up to us, as you said. We have an opportunity and to try to instill that in the next generation. That's really the only hope, the way that I see it, because it's not going to be coming from the people that don't want them to do those things for themselves. They're making it much more easy.
It takes intentionality. You have to want to know what it took. You have to be inquisitive about how we got here as a people, especially with everyone tearing down our history, with the removal of monuments and things that happened in over the course of the last several years, the last 10 years or so. I think that you have to be intentional about wanting to change, wanting to understand kind of where you come from and what it took to actually get there. That's part of the reason I'm so invested in Project Appleseed. Without that desire to dive deeper than just what's handed to you,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of hope either.
Right. Yeah. I can see that it's going to take work, and it's not just going to be something that's going to be handed to anybody.
Right.
It's going to take effort. And so they're going to have to want to seek that. But in order for them to want to seek that, they're going to have to know that it's available.
Mm-hmm.
And that only comes from people who are willing to teach the next generation. They're not getting that from, government school. They're not getting that from mainstream media. They're not getting it from what they see on TikTok and Instagram and all those other influences. It has to come from the home. It has to come from the parents, and it has to come from people who do have that recognition and
Yep.
understanding that it's going to be lost unless it's in some way preserved, right? Because conversations like this that we're having tonight, these aren't going to happen in the future. I guarantee you, man. They're just not going to permit free and open dialogue to be had where people can be influenced by that. The only reason that happens on a channel like this is because hardly nobody's listening.
Yeah.
And if there was millions of people that were being influenced, or that would be a problem for people.
But
and that's just the way that it is.
We put the message out there in the hopes that someday millions of people will be listening. That's
Yeah.
why we do it. And a seed that is not planted grows nothing.
Yeah.
We don't get
wise words
if we don't try. That's the whole point of it. We have to try. We have to put our voice out there. We have to do what we can to make a difference, because nobody else is going to.
100%. Yep. What has you the most optimistic about technology moving forward?
I feel like I see a lot of mixed conversation about artificial intelligence and a number of other related subjects, and I see the caution. I see caution and whoa, going too fast like I've never seen before. And I think that's an important part of it. Artificial intelligence scares people, I think, more than what a lot of folks may be willing to admit. And rightly so, because without the right level of governance and understanding or controlling where and how it's implemented, I think it can do a lot of dangerous things. So that's what I would say is that I think in the latest, what I've seen from technology as of late is there's opportunity that's presented itself to impose caution in a way that I have not seen in at least the last 15 years.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm a little bit undecided on the whole thing. Quite honestly, I've given it a lot of thought, and I'm not in the industry, but I've just heard what others who have concerns and
Mm-hmm.
all of these sort of things. I think it's just like any other tool. It's like a gun,
Yes.
it very much is. There's nothing inherently bad about a gun. It's just a
Mhm.
tool. It can cause harm just as AI can cause harm used in the wrong way or placed in the wrong hands. So I think that we're kind of at that point. But I also see with artificial intelligence some just incredible things that are happening, and how revolutionary it is to be able to have somebody who's actually a quadriplegic have their ability to do things restored
Mhm.
by some of the things that are being done technologically. I think that's an incredible advancement, and it's not something that we just throw the baby out with the bathwater, like, oh, it's all bad, let's just throw it.
I agree.
There's so much good to it, but again, used in the wrong hands and used in the wrong way, I really see the problem that can come from something like that.
If you look back at the history of organizations like Intel and IBM and kind of where they came from, and these major conglomerates in the world of technology and the world around us that have had such a profound impact on everything that we touch and everything that we do. If you look back at the evil history of some of those organizations and you see what they were involved in with like the Holocaust and World War II timeframe and that sort of thing, and not just even that far back, we look back in 20 years from now and we look at what companies who were involved in COVID management, there's going to be some reckoning for that too, but I think there's opportunity to come out of it, and like you said, there's opportunity to use it for good. And every advancement that we've ever had as a species, you could technically label as technology. So you know where we go from here, I think is going to be dependent upon people and the decisions that we make. Beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that is just advancing so quickly and so rapidly. I really feel in some ways
We have to slow it
lucky to I just feel lucky to be witnessing the things that I'm witnessing right now, because change is happening rapidly. And I'm not saying that I'm welcoming change, but it is a wild ride to see all of the things that we've seen just in the last, say 25 years of
down.
technology. Because I can remember as a kid, man, playing Atari and
Yes.
Pong and stuff where it was just so rudimentary and just so antiquated in comparison to what we
It
have
was, but
today.
but it was revolutionary to see those boards go up and down the left and right side of the screen and have a ball bounce between them.
Right.
I mean, that was revolutionary for its time. And then the NES came out with Mario and and Zelda. And look, I've got the stuff behind me,
Yeah.
that those things kind of changed my life growing up, so it's like all these were early bits of technology, and these were just the gaming aspects of it. That doesn't even get into the medical advancements and the things
Yeah.
that were not possible back then that are now. So there is value in it, like you said, and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But we've got an obligation to slow down. We've got an obligation to be cautious and smart about where we allow things to be implemented. And the people, I think, is where we have the biggest problem, because if we're of a biblical mindset, all we like sin have gone astray, and this world is decrepit and corrupt because of sin's nature. And so it's there needs to be some measure of governance around that in order to control it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, being a freedom loving person, I fight myself in even admitting that or saying that.
Right.
So
I think one of the things that's, if people can just keep in the back of their mind and think about it, like we were just talking about Pong and where things have progressed to, think about the technology that we have today and realize that that technology is the worst that it's going to be moving forward.
Yeah.
Everything from here is just going to keep getting better. We're going to look back in 5 years and go, are you kidding me? That was a joke.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy part about it. As cool as the things are that we have today, we're going to look back in 5 or 10 years and look at it like it's Pong.
Go try and watch, movies made in 720p on a 4K television and tell me that it's not the most pixelated, atrocious thing you've ever seen.
Right. Right. Yeah. Grumpy says, coming back from Kentucky, I was shocked. No register as we know it. The worker had me walk through how to check out. It was AI that took my money, and
yeah,
that being a sad thing. That's 100% coming. I was
You
actually
knew
going
it.
to talk about that in a future live stream. I've got some video, and I talked about this a while ago, actually, where they're implementing this in Whole Foods, which is owned by Amazon, and Amazon is doing this palm scan thing where you're basically, it takes an imprint of your palm, and once it's got that information, all you do is you walk in and it scans the blood vessels in your hand. You walk in and there's cameras everywhere. There's weight sensors so that when you pull something off, it just adds it to your bill, and you just walk out. You walk out through the gates that'll open up, and they've already got stuff like that in a lot of airports and stuff they're rolling out. So that's just where things are headed.
Where that starts is decisions like $15 minimum wage. Increasing things to the point that the human value is humanity is devalued compared to the technology. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
When the human life and the human capability and the human impact is valued less than the technology, that's where those decisions start.
Yeah, I think that's been a trend that's been in play for a long time.
It is.
And we could totally go down that rabbit hole. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I wanted to ask you about this bullet balm, man, because I know that's something that you got new, and I could see that your hair's looking pretty dapper from here. So I'm assuming that you got some bullet balm up in there. So why don't you give me a little lowdown on your balm?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So this, like we were kind of talking about it earlier in the broadcast, right? So this stuff I used to make as a leather conditioner. If that'll wrong camera.
Mm-hmm.
I used to make it as a leather conditioner for everything that I sent out, everything that I made for weather protection, for all of it, right? And it does a fantastic job at that. But I recently reformed the formula that I've been using for the last 10 years and got it to something that I can pretty much mass produce. I've had a number of requests over the years to sell this as a conditioner, as an alternative to some of the production or commercial ones that are out there. I like mine the most because it has 2 ingredients. In the natural flavor one or natural smell one, and then the other one that I'll be releasing next week or so is a cedar wood peppermint. I'll be making another batch of that, and both of those are available up on my Etsy store. But the natural one has 2 ingredients. The cedar wood peppermint is 4, and you can pronounce every single one of them.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like stuff like that. Stuff that we can actually know what's in it, and it's not a bunch of weird chemicals.
And I'll be honest with you, there's nothing special about this. It's a product that I could show any one of your listeners how to make, and they could do it themselves. The only difference is I built it. I put the time and materials into it. I put it in a tin, and I'm trying to offer it to people. But I'm not trying to do anything that somebody else couldn't recreate on their own homestead if they really wanted to.
Right.
It's that simple. And that's that level of free knowledge and education, I think, is empowering. What makes it valuable to somebody else is the fact that they didn't have to spend their time to do it. And for that, I'm willing to sell it to them so they can.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. I appreciate that. I think that if people are looking for that sort of thing, I did put all the links to not only the video that you put out here, I think yesterday or this morning
Yep.
it was maybe. There's a video basically showing kind of how that balm works and what it consists of and how it can benefit you. So if you guys are at all interested in that, you can go to the show notes, check out that video. It's on YouTube. And yeah, give it a look, man. But I think it's really important that we are not only a producer, we're not just consumers, but we also produce something. And so, by you doing that, it's providing something to members of the community that should they need something like that, you're a person and a resource they can go to. So I think it's just important to do,
Yep.
you know? So um, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I guess, the state of the world as we kind of start to wrap things up here.
Okay.
There's a lot of problems, I think, with our government. I think most of us would probably agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's the one thing aside from completely eliminating government altogether? What is the one thing you think we could do to actually reform our government, to get it back to the constitutional principles that it was founded on? How could we reform it?
If trying to get it back into under control or under the original ideas of the founding fathers, what I would say is it's local. It starts local communities, local level jurisdictions, changes and decisions that are made at a very local level. The federal government should be restricted and limited in capability to its core, functions that it was originally founded for, but everything else should be left up to decision by local municipalities, by local governments. You can't legislate for 300 million people or whatever 3 million people and expect it to apply to everybody. That's too broad a brush for pedantic rules, and I think that's a big part of where it starts. So I think people have to get involved locally. People have to be willing to. You don't like something, step up and change it, and that doesn't always mean you got to run for office. Sometimes it means civil disobedience. Sometimes it means you're not going to follow the rules, and you let that play out. I'm not advocating anybody go off and start another insurrection or whatever. I'm just saying that you've got to be willing to put your feet where your mouth is. You've got to be willing to step into the fight. I think that's the best advice I would give.
Right. I know for myself, growing up as a kid, you have, I guess, a different impression of your relationship to the world around you, particularly your government, particularly authority, if you will. From your perspective, has there been an evolution in the way that you view your relationship to government or authority?
Yeah, I don't want anything to do with it. Leave me the hell alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust that government, that authority, that to have, not that I don't trust them, is I don't trust them to have my best interest at heart. I don't trust them. I trust them like I trust Satan. If I'm being point in fact about it.
Well, let me ask you this: how did you get to that point? Because we all didn't start there, but that's obviously where you're at this point in time. What was the thing that got you to that point? Was it a repeated pattern of certain things, or what
Yeah,
just got your focus there?
Corruption in the legal system that I witnessed firsthand, and decisions that were made by I can't really get into specifics, but there are things that happened not if not to me, to people that I know that I'm very close to, where it became very evident that there is corruption at the highest levels that I can understand and interpret, and um, the impacts of that they have real world consequences, um, and they're not in the best interest of anybody that I know or myself. Um, that's largely where it starts. Legal decisions in courtrooms and things like that you see from corrupt judges, and they're confirmed corrupt because 10 years later they get all those things get overturned, but that still doesn't change the impact to the person that was negatively affected in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, look at what they did to Kyle Rittenhouse after he defended himself while he was trying to help people. He wasn't just out there being a menace. The dude was out there trying to help people, and they ruined his life for it, or attempted. And it'll take every ounce of his being to claw back from that, right? Those are simple examples, or prioritizing the life of a drug fiend like George Floyd over anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying the cops were wrong in that situation, or that I'm not trying to cast judgment or impose my perspective on any of that. I'm saying that they glorified the wrong person. They glorify one person because it fits an agenda, and that agenda does not match up in any way, shape, or form with what I've come to know of this country, for myself, for anybody around me, for the people that I love, and I don't trust them for that reason.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, because we do have such a great, great nation. And I think that there's so many great people in this nation that want to just be a patriot and be good citizens and contribute and do what we're supposed to do. We want to comply in that way. I think most people do. They don't want to, be bucking the system just for the sake of bucking the system. But when you see that the system is just stacked against the average person, when you see the corruption at the highest levels, when you see the lies repeatedly, it can definitely change your viewpoint on all of these sort of things. Two-tier justice system.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you one thing, but then they act in another way. And when you see that in front of you and it's so blatantly obvious, it can definitely change a person.
Yeah.
And I don't
me.
know if that's their intent to do those sort of things, but it's having an effect, because I think that there's a lot of people who used to feel a certain way about their country and their government that now feel maybe a little bit differently.
I feel like it's rooted in original sins, in sins of pride, in sins of power, in sins of greed. You know what I mean? I feel like those are the origins of it. Those are the roots of it, and we didn't do enough to combat it.
You know what, though? This has been going on, man, for decades. This has been going on for absolute decades. But the difference now is we have a lot more information coming in, and we have a lot more exposure to what's actually happening. We have that device that we can research and get other forms of information. And I think that's a real problem for the deep state, in a sense.
Let's put it this way. I don't think the CIA could murder or could execute Kennedy in the middle of Dallas anymore in 2024 if he had to do it again.
There's cameras everywhere.
My point. And everybody's got one on them.
Yeah.
Now they could take someone out in a prison cell like Epstein, but it's because there's nobody there.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, man, when you start really thinking about things and not just going with the established narrative that's being put forward. But man, it is a crazy, crazy thing to think that the institutions that we used to look toward to get our information, ABC, NBC, CBS, and just how nakedly obvious it is that they're one-sided, but yet they've been that way forever. It's just that there was never another side to go to So they
Right.
had a monopoly on that flow of information, and they had people in lockstep just going, oh yeah, that's the news. I guess that's how things are. It's a
It's
different world now.
it absolutely is. It's the people like, you know, uh, Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro and Prager University that I think terrify the traditional media the most. And then there's the extension of that with dudes like you know, with you're not quite we're not quite to that level, but we're still speaking the similar language. We're still part of that same narrative. And at some point, I think the more local or the smaller we have that we are, the more authentic we are,
Yeah.
and the more authentic we're able to be. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There is a lot of voices out there right now. I mean, everybody and their brother has a podcast.
yeah,
And I think it's great. I think it's great. I'm very much in favor of more information rather than less,
yep,
and let people decide for themselves what they would rather listen to. Is it something that they find value in? Is it something that's entertaining, informative, or whatever? And let the chips fall where they may. There's a myriad of different places you can go to spend your time and listen. And
yep,
so, this is just a little ripple in a huge pond over here, but there is a lot of voices out there right now, and I'm very much thinking that at some point they're going to do their level best to try to silence and make some of those voices be a little bit less effective, because there's a lot of people out there right now putting out some information that,
yeah,
I mean, when you see podcasts out there that are getting 4 or 5 times the nightly viewership or daily viewership of the legacy media,
yeah,
that's an interesting transition, and they're probably crapping in their in their pants, is trying to figure out how are we going to deal with this. But they don't have the actual message for the people that want to seek information. So it's an interesting time, man, for
they
sure.
they can't put that genie back in the bottle. The big tech companies created these platforms to allow creatives, and then it tried to take it over for for their own agenda, and then there are forces that are using it against them, using that same technology against them in order to introduce more truth, more information, bring it all to light. And the reality is, the fewer the voices we have, the more information that can hide in the shadows.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. Yep. I fully agree with that. So I think we all have an obligation, as I've been trying to say, to speak our mind and um, not be silenced, because we do have the ability to voice our opinion. And I think we have an obligation to do so and to have dialogue and put our ideas out there. And like I said, let it fall where it may.
Yeah.
Uh, What has you the most concerned about the state of the world moving forward? What's the thing that kind of has got you thinking, man, I really, that's a problem for me, or it's going to be a problem in the future? What has you the most concerned, if anything?
OPSEC, so I'll be general about it. but I would say, I'm going to go back to the conversation that you had with when I was in the room with Bobby and Patrick, right? And you were asking about what happens when the power goes down and how fast civilization breaks down, all that kind of stuff. And y'all were saying, I think it was 5 to 10 days was your realistic estimate or whatever. Based on what I've seen in technology, I was sitting there shaking my head the whole time during that part of the conversation, because I was like, there's a breakdown in civility inside of 24 hours, modern day, currently. We go crazy inside of 24 hours if the internet goes down. Power grid goes down, internet goes down. Inside of 24 hours, this world goes to shit fast. I think 5 years from now, it's inside of 6 hours or 12 hours at most. And that, I think, is probably what gives me the most pause right now. I think there's a degradation in the quality of resources that we have over time, and that's part of it. But one of the biggest things that we rely on in the modern world is the internet, is the modern grid. And when we lose that, if we lose that, we don't know how to act. And I don't think people who don't already have the skill can't go get on YouTube to go get the skill to learn how to live like an 1800s person or a depression era person, and that kills people. And then you look at the impact of internet technologies and the Internet of Things, the smart home technology stuff like we're talking about, the impact on different industries, everything from medicine to insurance to oil and gas to nuclear facilities, all those things, right? I mean, there is not a single industry in the world today that is not touched by the power grid and by the internet. And it does not take a big imagination to understand the impact of that, both on a macro level and a micro level.
Do you find it, do you think, and now this is just you spitballing it, obviously, your impression of what you think may happen. None of us know, but do you think that this would be used in a manner to force an issue, like from a standpoint of control, the people that are actually controlling this thing? Do you think that they would intentionally make the power grid go down to affect this sort of?
I think they would open the door, put a sign out front in the yard that says, "Come on in," and turn around and let China or whoever do
Hmm.
what they want to do in order to effect control.
Hmm.
I don't think the powers that be intentionally sabotage our own system, frankly, because I don't think they're smart enough to know how. But I think that they would unlock a door and they would let our enemies in order to. I mean, it's obvious they want to go to war. God knows why, but they want to go to war. I think the war engine is profitable for this country. We've proven that over time. And maybe that's the initiative. It usually comes back to money and power.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. I think it'd be an interesting thing if they actually allowed another foreign entity to take that lever of control, because it would be a lot more advantageous for the lever of control to be on our hands or within
yeah,
our people, because they would be able to be ultimately in control rather than saying, oh, it's this foreign adversary and now we need to figure out how to fix it. They would already have an answer before they even flip the switch if it were initiated on our end. So I don't know if I fully agree with you on that. And, I mean, it's just a possibility and a
yeah,
hypothetical, but
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I look at things like our porous border and the narrative that now has changed, and now they want to control it after they've let all the foreign whoever's come in. All of our enemies are on site. I think they're already here, and we already have the tooling in place for them to do whatever they're going to do. That's why I think that it's a matter of they're just going to turn around and open the door and let them come in so that there's justification for whatever plan they have next that
Right.
ultimately leads to more control.
Right. Well, I guess we're getting a little bit close to the election. So let me ask you, let me ask you, what do you think is going to be the thing, man? What's going to be the October surprise?
October surprise.
Got any thoughts about that?
I mean, I hate to be I hate to predict things like that because they really could go either way. I had a strong suspicion that they were going to successfully find a way to get rid of Trump and put Nikki Haley in place.
Hmm.
I think she's a plant from nefarious means, be it, and I don't think that's a Democrat Republican Party line. I think both of them are in on it. I felt like she was, if they were going to be successful in getting, scapegoating Trump, that Nikki Haley would be put in. I think that Biden likely does not make it to the election. If I
Hmm.
had to guess, that would be my suggestion or my suspicion rather. For one reason or another, he doesn't make it to the election. I think that they're going to put Big Mike in.
Hmm.
Would be my next guess. And if they put Michelle Obama or Big Mike, yeah, up against Trump, I think that depending on how woke the country is and how many hearts and minds we have not been able to change to the contrary, that there's a strong chance that she would make it if she was nominated. If that
Yeah,
ever,
I think that's the one real thing that if in fact they decide to put in a late edition candidate, it's going to make the results a lot more believable in
Mhm.
a sense because we have seen the results from both of the candidates that are running currently. We can see that Biden is a complete disaster in so many areas of you know running this country. And Trump, for all of his faults, he did a pretty fair job, unless you just hate the guy because you think he's a womanizing racist.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, so it's kind of hard to suggest that, here's old feeble Joe who's going to, come into this victory again. I don't see that being very believable by a lot of people. So I think it would make a lot more sense if they were to slide another candidate in.
But they
But
can't. The timing is important too because they can't do it too early. Otherwise, we get the cackle. We get Kamala.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
it's interesting, man. I don't even know if I'm going to vote, quite honestly. I don't feel as though my voice really matters here, and I know that's probably not the correct way to look at things, because if everybody did that, then you know what, nobody'd vote. But it's just very frustrating being a part of something that you think you're doing good, and I don't know. I've just kind of lost faith in the system in that sense. So I don't even know if I'm going to vote, but I am going to be a spectator
Mhm.
leading up to the election because this is very entertaining, if nothing else, right?
It certainly gives us a lot of content to talk about. Yes.
Yeah, man. Hey, I think we're going to wrap it up tonight. I really appreciate having you on, and I appreciate all the folks that were able to join in tonight and hang out with us here and just kind of have a conversation. But aside from the Midwest Preparedness Project, do you plan on making any public appearances at any festivals or trade shows or anything?
I mean, really, it's like I've told you, I'm kind of heads down, just doing the work. I think for now we're kind of aim small, miss small. We're going to keep it to the Midwest Preparedness Project. We're going to keep it to supporting um, helping produce the show that we're doing for that, and supporting the guys as they go to the other festivals. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to those. I'll be on the channel, be on nowherehomesteady.com. And, if I'm asked to be somewhere else, yeah, we'll figure it out. But aim small, miss small. I'm seeing where this goes for now.
Yeah, yeah, cool, man. I put all the links to your social media and all that sort of stuff in the show notes. But is there anything maybe you want to just leave folks with as a final thought, or maybe some words of encouragement, since we don't want to leave them with the impression that we're talking about all this negative stuff? So maybe we can uplift people's spirits on the way out and share something with them.
I would say, I'm a middle-aged, overweight, broken dude with medical issues out the rear end, and I can still do this homestead stuff. And if I can do it, I guarantee anybody, almost anybody can, if they're willing to. You got to be willing to do the work and put in the time. But that's my biggest advice and biggest challenge is be willing to put in the work and to just go do it. There's the reward you'll find will be on the opposite end, and no matter the outcome, you're going to learn something from it, and that's the real value.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Let me see here. I got Miss Barb. She's getting on me here. Says not voting is not helpful, but we all have to do what we're led to. Keep gathering info. Listen for his leading. That's my opinion. Thanks for a good conversation. Yeah, I want to thank all of you for being in the chat tonight and just kind of hanging out with us. Like I said, it's been a pleasure having you on, definitely, and chatting. I hope I get the opportunity to meet you like in real life. That would be pretty cool. Maybe I'll get out there to Kansas at some point. I would love to be able to get myself and Rebecca out there, and we'll see if we can't maybe work on doing that sometime in the future. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. And again, thanks everybody for joining us. We do have a few items on our farm store, porterhouseandteal.com. We're selling comfrey, shipped out a few orders today. We've also got Rebecca's soap on there. So if it's something you're interested in, take a look at it. And I'm going to be uploading this conversation on the podcast iHeartRadio. You can catch it on Spotify, Audible, and Google. And again, thanks again, guys. Go out and be better tomorrow than you were today.
Thank you, everybody.